Willkommen zum NucTalk, dem Podcast des Nuklearforums Schweiz über Kernenergie und Nukleartechnologie. In der 45. Folge unterhalten wir uns mit Carl Berglöf aus Schweden. Der promovierte Nuklearphysiker ist seit 2024 Nuclear New Build Coordinator für die Regierung. Wir reden über seine Funktion, die bestehenden schwedischen KKW und die dortige Energiepolitik. Weiter erfahren wir, was die schwedische Regierung in Sachen Neubau unternimmt und wie es um diese Pläne steht. Ich bin Matthias Rey und hoffe, die Folge gefällt euch.
Carl Berglöf, thank you very much for joining us today. We traditionally want to get to know our guests in the beginning, so please, if you don't mind, tell us a bit about yourself, your background, education, and the work you do.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It's very nice to be here. Yes, so I work now for the Swedish government, but I have a long history in nuclear power. I have a PhD in reactor physics from the Royal Institute of Technology from 2010. And since then, I've been working in the nuclear industry. So I worked for 6-7 years at the utility Vattenfall, both with existing nuclear power and also preparation for new nuclear power. And then since 2017, I work for the Swedish Atomic Forum and an advisor within Association for Swedish Energy Companies, Sweden. And that I did for 6-7 years until last year since then I work for the government. So I have a background in the academy and in the industry, and now I work for government.
So Sweden has effectively reversed a nuclear phase-out decision in 2010, and then later, or since then, under the Kristersson government, adopted a clear roadmap for new nuclear capacity. And as you said, you were appointed as National Nuclear New Build Coordinator in January 2024. What exactly is your role as the National Nuclear Coordinator, and maybe what are your goals in this role?
Yes, so let me first describe a little bit the background, why we are in this situation that we have today in Sweden. So in 1980, actually the year when I was born, we had a referendum on nuclear power in Sweden. And after that, it was decided that all nuclear power will be shut down by the year 2010. And then if we move forward in time to the end of the 90s, that was upon the closure of the first unit in Barsebäck. It was clear that Sweden will not manage without nuclear power after the year 2010. So already at that time, the nuclear ban was removed. And the result of that was that the industry did a lot of investment in their plants, power upgrades and lifetime extensions, etc. But it was not very clear what is the future of nuclear power in Sweden. And then in 2009, there was a political agreement that the 10 units we have in Sweden at the time, it's okay to replace them with new ones to maintain the current number of reactors. And then at that time, I was working at Vattenfall and we started to prepare for replacement reactors in Ringhals at the time. But then in the year 2014, we had a new government in Sweden, a red-green government, and there was a broad agreement, parliamentary agreement, to have a 100% renewable electricity system by the year 2040. But still, it said that nuclear power is not forbidden, but the target is to have a renewable system by the year 2040. And this made it clear that investment in new nuclear is something for the future. So all the preparations for new nuclear were stopped. Now we're coming back to this government that entered office in 2022. They changed this radically. So based on recent history, to be able to meet the climate targets and also the energy crisis, also introduced more support for nuclear power. So there was a total change in nuclear policy in Sweden to a nuclear expansion policy. And that is where I come into the picture. So, of course, when changing policy from a phase-out policy to an expansion policy, all legislations must be changed, all authority instruction must be changed. A lot of things must be in place to make it possible again to invest in nuclear power. And it's important to not forget anything in all the preparations that are being done at the moment. And I think that's why they asked me to assist to make sure that, we do what's necessary. So basically, I'm giving advice to the government. I operate as an independent authority, scrutinizing the plans of the government and also giving advice what can be done in addition to speed up the development of new nuclear power in Sweden. So that's basically my role, and also to be the single point of contact for external stakeholders to make it easy to reach the government with ideas how to prepare for what will happen.
I have to say, that does sound like a big commitment on part of the government to nuclear, having such a role, the role that you have, and having a nuclear engineer in that role. I have to say that's unusual for us. Something else.
Yeah, I think that's of course a part of the plan to have people with actual knowledge and experience close to the decision making. And I think that is part of what I believe or hope to have a success in this. Mm-hmm. Of course, we will see if this will be successful or not. We don't have the plans there yet.
Yeah, of course, but the commitment is there. You already hinted at it. We go to the energy mix and the current situation now. In theory, could Sweden do without nuclear power in its generation mix? And what would the alternatives be and probably disadvantages?
Of course, it's possible to have an electricity system without nuclear power. Many countries have that. But I would say that Sweden is different from many other countries because we have very high electricity demand, in particular demand per capita. We have a lot of heavy industries demanding a lot of electricity. And we have the steel industries, we have the paper mills, etc., etc. And also, we foresee a strong expansion in the use of electricity to be able to meet the climate targets. So, but if we just look where we are now, it would be difficult to manage without nuclear power. And we also noticed that during the energy crisis a couple of years ago, we used to have 12 reactors in Sweden, and now we have 6. So we have already close half of the fleet. And we are experiencing the consequences of that. So during the electricity crisis, or energy crisis, we had very high power prices because we were affected by the electricity prices in other countries. If we would have more of our own electricity production, we wouldn't experience that to the same extent. We experienced also difficulties, and this is not connected to the electricity crisis, but because of the closure of 6 units in the south of Sweden, it has been more difficult to transfer electricity from the north to the south, because nuclear power is also part of the transmission system. It's all connected together. The closure of 6 units has given us larger bottlenecks in the system and a larger geographical spread of the electricity price, with typically much lower prices in the north and higher in the south. And also we hear that the industry, they do not prefer the fluctuation of electricity price from hour to hour. They want to have a more stable price. And I think we have there was a quote just a couple of days ago when Swedish industries announced that they will join the first project in Sweden as co-investors, and they said that nuclear power is definitely necessary for their future. So there's a very clear signal from the Swedish industry that this is needed.
Okay, let's remain within the grid. Let's say there are those critiques that argue that nuclear and renewables don't go together well, are incompatible, because nuclear plants provide unflexible baseload power. Sweden has a large share of wind power in its grid. How do you manage to integrate nuclear energy economically into a grid with such a high share of wind?
Yeah, I like to turn that question a little bit. How is it possible to integrate wind power into an electricity system? And well, the answer will be the same. But if we start to look at the Swedish perspective, so in Sweden we have a lot of hydropower, and like you in Switzerland, we see it's an excellent, flexible contributor to the system. So that helps us to integrate a lot of wind power in the system. And how can we allow hydropower to be that flexible counterpart to wind power? Yes, by allowing wind power to not operate in base operation mode. So if you don't want to use hydro for base load, then we need something else that is low carbon or fossil free, and that is nuclear power. So by having nuclear power, hydropower, and wind together, we can solve this thing in an excellent manner. Of course, all countries doesn't have hydropower, and for those cases, and that's also if we want to reach doubled electricity demand in Sweden, hydropower cannot be expanded. We have the rivers that we have, etc. So then, of course, there must be other solutions like flexible demand, electricity storage, and also nuclear power can be operated in a more flexible way than we typically see today. So it's a matter of setting the right design criteria and economical incentives in place. In Sweden, historically, we have been operating nuclear power mainly in baseload, but also with some flexible operation, day and nighttime power adjustments that have been done. But these capabilities have been removed 20 years ago when we did the power upgrades, etc., because we had the need of baseload operations. So that is how we usually operate nuclear today. But for the future, of course, it is up to the market participants to decide how they want to optimize the plants. But I see several options there.
We'll talk about the future a little bit later. But in the present and the current fleet, how is Sweden ensuring sufficient skilled personnel and supply chain competence after decades without new construction, but also after shutting down a major part of its fleet?
Yes, it's a good question. First of all, since we have nuclear power in operation today, we do have a rather good starting point. We do have some training capacity and educational capacity at universities, etc. And we have also been good at maintaining that capacity by having international students coming to Sweden and being educated. But the interest from Swedish students has not been very large, actually, throughout these years, due to the fluctuating energy policies regarding nuclear, of course. Yeah, looking more into the future from where we are now, I see, of course, challenges, and not only regarding specialists, but also regarding the more broader types of work, construction work, concrete work, etc. So we are talking the whole spectrum here. And at this moment, I don't have a good answer for that. That is actually something that I'm working intensively on now to find a good way forward to obtain a solution for that. Mm-hmm. And there are many aspects of this, not only having the right educations, etc. We will need most likely also to have people coming from other countries working in Sweden, and there must be an efficient way to have the safety protocols fulfilled, etc. So there are many aspects of this, and this has to be developed throughout time. So that if not that, from next year we will have a solution in place. I think this is something that has to grow in time. And we all know dealing with nuclear power is not a quick fix. So there will be time to meet this demand, I think.
I see some similarities between Sweden and Switzerland. We also have good university programs that used to be frequented more by people from abroad. But recently, I think the numbers of Swiss students and the general number of students has increased.
Yeah, we see that in Sweden too. This last year, we have seen a strong increase in interest from Swedish students. So that's very encouraging to see.
Yes. I think we could say that we're also in similar stages in the itinerary to a waste solution. Sweden has developed a disposed solution early on and is currently constructing a deep geological repository. How important was this step for public acceptance of nuclear in general, but mainly of new nuclear power plants?
I think it's been very important because everyone expects that if someone builds nuclear power in Sweden, it has to bring also a solution for the waste. There are high expectations regarding that. But I would like to highlight a challenge that we have. Although the industry in Sweden says that, yes, we have a solution for this in Sweden, I should say all permits related to that solution is limited to existing reactors.
Jesus.
Of course, the technology is developed 30 or 40 years of research and development. It doesn't have to be performed again, at least for light water reactors. But all the permits for the facility itself, the siting, etc., is limited to waste from existing nuclear. And that was important for the municipalities. They would like to know exactly what they are accepting, what they are saying yes. So when they accepted to have the repository within the municipality, it was with the condition that this is the waste from these reactors that we know today in Sweden. So, but regarding new nuclear, the Swedish government is now developing a new framework for how the waste must be managed. So if I go back again to the first nuclear program in Sweden, at that time when the waste management program was set up, it was known to everyone. How many reactors do we have in Sweden? Who are the owners of these reactors? What is the technology? How much waste will there be from these reactors? Everything was known. So it was possible to set up the plan and just divide the cost with the members of the plan. Now when we look forward, we don't know yet who will build nuclear reactors in Sweden, how many will there be, what technologies, what kind of waste will there be. And that makes it more difficult. So we're aiming for a kind of open-ended system that can be used for nuclear power as a continuous asset in Sweden, not as a parenthesis as it was historically. So we have to find a system where utilities can enter and also leave in an efficient way. Yeah, for the first one that enters the system, there is a risk that all the cost for the new system ends up at the first reactor for a few years, and that will make it very expensive to be the first utility or building the first reactor in this system. So we have to find a way where the government takes some risks in the beginning until there are sufficient number of stakeholders in the system. So that is another challenge. So the situation is quite different for new nuclear compared to existing nuclear. And this is now under development in Sweden, how to form this structure. And it is important to have a fairly good plan for the waste at an early stage, because it's important for those who make the investments and for the municipalities and the general public to earn the confidence that there is a solution for the waste in the future. And having the existing waste facilities helps, of course, to show that technically this is possible. We will just find the administration around it for new nuclear as well.
Okay, so speaking of support and acceptance, there are quite some similarities, I'd say, between the German-speaking part of the world and other parts, including the Nordic countries. How do they manage to generate and maintain public support for nuclear power and especially maintain a more factual, less ideological debate?
Well, I would say that in Sweden, it's been important to understand the consequences of not having nuclear or having less nuclear. As I indicated earlier, it became very clear for the public during the energy crisis what the consequences are. We noticed in the south of Sweden during the energy crisis that power prices went so high, so it became a problem for many households. And it was very clear to everyone that there was a connection to the phase out of 6 units in the south of Sweden and the high electricity prices they were experiencing. And now the industry are having problems in expanding because of lack of power. Although we do have, on an annual basis, we have more electricity than we are consuming. So we are exporting a lot of electricity in Sweden. But we don't have the capacity to connect new users. Of course, there are grid limitations, but we also have power limitations due to the lack of firm capacity. And this has been, I would say, in everyone's mind that there is a connection between nuclear power and the possibility to grow the grid. I shouldn't say everyone, but I would say that there's a general knowledge that there is a connection. And then, of course, there is the discussion, how can wind support in this and how can solar power be used, of course. But during the energy crisis, it became very clear that the level of firm capacity in Sweden was too low at that time, and not very much has changed since then. So I would say a clear indication of what the consequences of not having nuclear. That helps the debate, of course.
So then let's move on to, as we said, the future new build project, and also let's touch on the international perspective a bit. What has the current government done so far to enable investments in new nuclear power capacity in Sweden?
Yeah, the government has done a lot of things. I should first of all mention the financing model that has been set up. Since we had the background of phasing out nuclear power, there are a lot of uncertainties related to investments in nuclear powers. And also, since nuclear power contributes not only kilowatt hours in the system, but also upholding an efficient electricity system and energy market in general, there is an incentive for the government to support its development. So that's why the government has put forward and also now implemented a financing model, which is based on 2 main components, I would say. So it's first of all a state loan. So it is possible to have a low interest rate through a state loan. The state can borrow money in the cheapest possible way, and we will use that for nuclear power. And also a possibility to have a contract for difference, a CFD, which is a income guarantee for the one who invests in nuclear power. So those 2 together forms the financing mechanism which the government hopes will trigger investments. So that is one important thing. And the mechanism is open for everyone that would like to invest in nuclear power in Sweden, and it's open since 1st of August this year. So far, we didn't get any applications, but we are hoping to get them sooner or later. So that is one thing, the financing mechanism. And also, of course, it's important to have an efficient regulatory framework. The government is performing a total overhaul of all the regulations related to nuclear power, both the technology itself, but also the environmental codes, etc. And also to have an efficient licensing process. So there, in addition to the existing licensing process that we have since many years, we will add a new one. So it's possible to choose. The existing one has the governmental approval in the very end of the process. So it takes several years until you know if the society would like to have this nuclear plant or not. That makes it difficult to find investors for projects, etc. So to allow for new kind of financing schemes, we are adding a licensing process where the decision of the government come early on in the process, so that you remove the political risk early. And then if you get a positive outcome there, that the society would like to have this is of the overall positive of the society, then you go forward with the detailed applications with the relevant authorities. So that is another thing. And then there are a lot of other things ongoing. So yeah, I touched upon that. Having an efficient licensing process also relates to of course, the licensing of the technology and the work of the Radiation Safety Authority. So they have been given quite high, or I should say, increased resources to be able to follow what's happening in other countries and being observers in, for instance, the GJ process in the UK, and they have a memorandum of collaboration with the Canadian regulatory office, etc., etc. So being involved in processes in other countries is one way to make forthcoming process in Sweden more swift and efficient. It's also possible to have an early dialogue with the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority. So as a vendor from another country, it's possible to come to Sweden and have a dialogue with the regulator on the Swedish requirement to make sure that there are no showstoppers later on in the process. And then, we do a lot of other things related to conventional requirements that might affect the construction of a plant that are non-nuclear requirements, etc. So we do everything we can to make it as swift as possible as soon as an application will be filed in Sweden.
Okay, and where have these efforts and this framework led? What is the current specific situation regarding new build projects in Sweden?
As I said, we didn't get an application yet for the financing mechanism or for the permitting, but we expect applications to come. So the most mature project at this moment is the one driven by Vattenfall outside of the nuclear power plant Ringhouse at the Värö Peninsula. Vattenfall has decided to go further with small modular reactors there. So either they will build 3 BWRX 300 by Genova Hitachi, or 3 SMRs from Rolls-Royce SMR. So that would add up to 1,500 megawatts approximately. Then we do have other initiatives around. We have, for instance, the project developer Kärnfull Next. They are looking at 4 different sites in the southeastern part of Sweden. Now we're talking about greenfield sites, with Valdemarsvik being their main options at the moment. They could fit a few SMRs there. Well, the government is doing what it can to secure sites. So if you look at the greenfield sites, so there's a protected coastline today, but there's a proposal now to lift the ban on nuclear along this coastline to open up maybe a few places where it could be possible to build a nuclear power plant. Of course, the nature around the Swedish coastline is really very beautiful and attractive, so there must be a balance, of course. And then regarding existing sites, we do have existing sites where nuclear plants have been phased out and they are under decommissioning that would fit perfectly for new nuclear, such as Oskarshamn and Barsebäck. At the moment, the owner of those sites is not interested in investing in new nuclear. However, the municipalities in these areas are very eager to have new nuclear in this area. So they do whatever they can to prepare the detailed planning, the land use planning of these sites to be prepared, both regarding the land use plans and their internal processes in case someone would invest in the future. So although there is no preparations from the utility side, preparations are ongoing on the municipality side. And of course, Vattenfall has another site in Forsmark with 3 units in operation. The land allows more units there, but there is a congestion in the grid at the moment. So we have several sites, but all of them have some limitations. So it's important also to look at the greenfield sites.
But you mentioned Barsebäck, if I pronounced that correctly halfway. That was a political shutdown, as far as I know, and there were others, and then there were more recent setbacks, like the 2025 cross-party energy deal that didn't come through, that failed. Given all these aspects, how can Sweden ensure long-term investment security and then protect new projects from future political shifts or even government changes?
I would say there's been a dramatic change the last half year in Sweden. So, or the last year maybe. So, first of all, during the voting in the parliament regarding the siting of new nuclear were to allow them or not, there was a limitation previously in Sweden that it was only allowed to build new nuclear power plants at existing sites, not at greenfield. So that has been removed as well. When that was voted upon in the parliament, it was clear that all parties except two accepted new nuclear, not necessarily new sites, etc. But there are only two minor parties that did not like to see nuclear power. But the other parties, representing 88% of the parliament, they are in favor of new nuclear in various ways. And what happens since then is also that the biggest party in the opposition, the Social Democrats, they have expressed the support for having state-backed funding for new nuclear. So I would say that the political aspect is much smaller now than it was historically. So, and it's not my job as an advisor to the government to get involved in the political arena, but my task is rather to, within my mandate, which ends by the end of next year, be able to show a nuclear program, to illustrate a nuclear program that is so attractive that no one would like to remove it. So that is what I can do. And given the response from the industry, both nationally and internationally, I think we are on the right track in Sweden. So we just had an international conference on nuclear investments here in Stockholm. It was the Nordic-Baltic Nuclear Investment Summit. We invited banks and vendors and the international global supply chain. And I think the signal from that event was that Sweden is a very interesting country for nuclear investments. We have shown on an international level that Sweden is a place to expand nuclear. And there are more than 40 countries in the world now looking at investing in nuclear power, expanding their nuclear power in a different way, or becoming a newcomer country. If one, two, or five countries will manage that within a few years, but Sweden is one of those countries.
Mm-hmm. All right. You mentioned the most advanced projects involving small modular reactors. Is that a priority of the government? And on the other hand, how do advanced reactor technologies, such as, for example, those developed by Studsvik and Blikalla, fit into the country's long-term nuclear and maybe also export strategy?
Okay, yeah. So first of all, the Swedish strategy is not to have a government deciding upon the technology or the siting or which project to run or what technologies to use. So it's really up to the utilities and the market participants. So it's kind of a bottom-up approach in this strategy. And that differs from most other countries where the government has a very strong role in selecting technology and site and pointing with the whole hand. We need nuclear here and there. So in Sweden, the government has indicated a target in terms of capacity. And then that capacity has been dimensioning the conditions for investing in nuclear. But so overall, the government is thereby welcoming all technologies. And my role is to keep all doors open for all technologies. So it's up to the market to show that, or for those that would like to apply for the financing, that this is a technology that will work and the risks are manageable and it has a good timeline, etc. And then if that can be proven to be the case, then can get the financing support. But I would like to highlight that because when you ask about what is Sweden doing regarding nuclear new build, I didn't mention research and development. I should highlight that as well. That is a very important part of this, partly because it is a good way of showing that this is an attractive field of the industry to attract students, etc., but also to develop the technologies, of course. That's an important part of having a broad research and development plan, including Generation 4 reactors, etc. So it's not only about the financing scheme and licensing processes, it's also about incentivizing new technologies through research and development. Yeah, but overall, I think it's a strength that we don't need to do research and development first to be able to build new nuclear, because there are conventional technologies out there. But of course, new technologies can offer new applications, such as process heat applications, hydrogen production, or whatever. So that is, of course, very interesting and could be an important part in the longer run, of course.
So then let's broaden the perspective in a geographical way. How do you view the recent developments and shifts in the energy policies of neighboring countries like Denmark and Norway?
Well, I would say that it is helpful. They are following what we are doing in Sweden, and if they decide to do the same thing, that's an indication that we are also doing the right thing. I think that countries like Norway, Denmark, and other neighboring countries, of course, they have an important role in the Swedish program to provide industrial capacity, because we don't have all the resources in Sweden to be able to build these plants. We need to have access to an international supply chain. Norway, for instance, they have excellent experience in offshore technologies with very high requirements, and there are probably industries in Denmark and other countries as well, Finland, Poland, and those that are also looking at new nuclear. With the regional approach, this will be easier to accomplish, of course. So even though independently if these countries will build nuclear power or not, there will be an important part in the Swedish program, I think.
And on the other hand, what's your take on Switzerland's phase-out plans?
Of course, the energy policy of Switzerland is up to you in Switzerland to decide upon. So I see the benefits in Sweden for new nuclear. It's very clear to me that this is a good thing to do. If you would like to follow, I guess, Swedish stakeholders are happy to support you.
Given the most recent developments in our politics, we might move your direction again. So that leads us to our last question. We traditionally end our interviews with an outlook. What future do you see for nuclear in Sweden and the Nordic countries in the long run? And vice versa, what role will Sweden's nuclear industry play on the world stage?
Sweden is now one of the very few countries in the Western world that is aiming for building plants. So we will learn from this, of course. We are not the first ones. Of course, Canada is building, and France and UK, Poland, Czech Republic, etc., and maybe also in other countries. And I have dialogue with all these countries already now. There will be a few countries in the Western world that will learn a lot from this. And I think the Swedish supply chain will engage with these plans and develop with time. Even though we will not be able to build our first plants ourselves, maybe we will be able to do that in future. And definitely already today, Swedish industries will be a part of constructions in other countries, or actually Swedish industries are involved in Hinkley Point C, etc. And I think that the global Swedish component will also grow in time, given the lessons we will learn from the projects here. So yes, I foresee that Sweden again will develop to a global nuclear country to count on. But at this moment, we do have challenges to kickstart the national program. So from the government perspective, we really have to focus on Sweden now. But who knows, in the future, we will develop to something else that can support also other countries. So that would be my long-term view.
Okay. Well, we will, as I said, certainly be following it, the developments in Sweden, and looking forward to it. But for now, Carl, thank you very much for your time and the interesting chat. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Vielen Dank nochmal an Carl Berglöf für das spannende Gespräch. Mehr zum Thema findet ihr wie immer auf www.nuklearforum.ch. Ich hoffe, die Folge hat euch gefallen. Bitte sagt es weiter und vergesst nicht, den NucTalk-Podcast zu abonnieren. Wir freuen uns auch über Kommentare und Bewertungen. Danke fürs Zuhören und bis zum nächsten NucTalk.